Ever caught yourself doing something in public and wondered if everyone's judging? Believe it or not, some habits can silently damage your reputation and self-respect. In this video, we'll break down the 10 things you should never do in public, sharing practical tips to master your behavior, gain confidence, and earn respect effortlessly. Stick around, learn actionable strategies you can start using today, and if you find this helpful, hit that subscribe button for more life-changing insights delivered in a simple, human way. Your growth starts here. Number 1. Overshare personal problems with strangers. A moment of honesty in a crowded cafe can feel like sunlight breaking through clouds, warm, immediate, and oddly relieving. A sudden urge to unburden, to speak the ache aloud, rises like a tide. The seat across from a stranger becomes a confessional, and words pour out, a breakup described in vivid detail, debts confessed like an accusation, a private betrayal narrated down to the names. The voice trembles, hands fidget with a cup that smells of burnt coffee, eyes scan the room for rescue, for someone to witness the drama and validate the pain. That relief is real. The consequence is real too, but rarely obvious in the moment. Oversharing personal problems with strangers is a habit with cost to dignity, to safety, to future relationships, and to the quiet discipline of self-mastery. It is tempting because it looks like relief and because vulnerability is powerful, but vulnerability without wisdom is exposure, not strength. A Stoic would frame this simply: control what is within your control and accept what is not. Emotions rise. That much is out of direct control. How those emotions are expressed, where they are directed, and what is revealed are fully within control. Choose a container for suffering. The container can be a private journal, a counselor's office, a trusted friend who has earned the right to hold your story. A container preserves dignity. It allows pain to be acknowledged and worked on, without scattering pieces of the self across strangers who do not carry the responsibility of confidentiality. Imagine a delicate glass sculpture, the story of your life. Hand it carefully to someone who will place it on a pedestal, not fling it into a crowd. Practical steps exist, and they are simple to practice. The first tool is a pause. When the urge to overshare presses, count to 10 slowly, inhale on 4, exhale on 6. Breathing lengthens the space between impulse and action. That space is a place of power. During the pause, run 3 quick questions in the mind. Is this my responsibility to tell right now? What do I hope to gain by telling? Could sharing this create risk for me or others? If the answers point to impulsive relief rather than constructive resolution, do not speak. Use the body to redirect. Close the hand around the cup. Take a sip. Change posture. The physical act of sipping resets the nervous system and signals restraint. Second, prepare phrases to redirect or downshift the conversation. Words can be like locks that close the door gently. Phrases such as, "I'm dealing with something, I'll talk about it later," or "That's a private matter I'm working through." Give honest signals without inviting a cipher of probing questions from someone who will not carry the burden of your truth. These lines are not evasions. They are boundaries articulated with clarity and calm. Practice them until they land naturally. The practice is part of building character. Third, form a compact of trusted listeners. One person who listens without judgment is more valuable than 100 strangers who offer sympathy like currency and then spend it elsewhere. Establish a list, a therapist, a close friend, a mentor. Label them by the kind of holding they provide: advice, witness, or professional help. When pain arises, consult your list before consulting a stranger. If the pain demands expression immediately, write a brief note instead. Writing translates chaos into order. It creates distance enough to see patterns and solutions. Keep a small notebook or a notes app labeled Morning Release or Immediate Thoughts and pour the first tidal wave into it. That alone reduces the whisper to a manageable hum. There is also a social intelligence dimension. People form impressions quickly, and oversharing can change those impressions in ways that close doors. Employers, colleagues, or future partners sometimes hear stories out of context. A public confession of despair can be misread as instability, reckless, or emotionally indiscriminate. This is not to suggest hiding pain. It is to insist on strategy. Pain shared wisely invites support. Pain displayed wildly invites misunderstanding. Think of the future self, the person who must navigate life once the instant of relief fades. Protect that future by choosing the audience today. Safety is another urgent reason to choose containment. Personal information spoken aloud can be weaponized. Financial details, relationship vulnerabilities, or habits mentioned casually in a cafe can become data points for someone with ill intent. A stranger's interest is not an invitation to vulnerability. Maintain core secrets close. Share them only with people who have proven discretion. This is not paranoia, it is prudence. Practical rehearsal changes habit. Run a short script in private. Stand in front of a mirror and speak a condensed truth instead of the whole saga. I'm having a tough week. I appreciate the concern. Notice the sensation in the chest as the sentence is spoken. The chest relaxes when words are concise and purposeful. Record a voice memo saying the short line and play it back. The body learns the rhythm of restraint. When the cafe moment comes, the rehearsed sentence will be ready. This muscle memory is self-respect in practice. Turn oversharing into a productive ritual instead. Replace public confession with a daily or weekly practice that channels emotion into growth. Morning pages, 3 handwritten pages poured out without editing. Move the need to confess into a private laboratory. A weekly debrief with a trusted friend becomes the sacred vessel for processing. Regular therapy allocates the full weight of complex suffering to someone trained to hold it. These rituals offer the sunlit relief oversharing mimics without scattering pieces of self across public space. Language matters. Shift from drama to data. Instead of narrating the worst scenes in granular detail, communicate facts and requests. I lost my job last week and need to update my resume. Could you recommend a good editor? Turns a lament into a tangible next step. Request-oriented language invites action and reduces the hunger for attention that oversharing seeks to feed. If what is wanted is compassion, say so. I'm finding this hard and would appreciate a moment of listening. That clarity directs the other person toward a specific role, not as judge, not as gawker, but as an intentional giver of support. There is strength in solitude too. Stoic practice encourages internal conversation before external broadcasting. A short ritual of naming emotions works. Identify the feeling, locate it in the body, and address it with a small task. If anger surges, walk for 5 minutes and name 3 neutral facts about the environment. The way sunlight hits the window, the smell of coffee, the rhythm of distant footsteps. Naming lowers reactivity. If sadness wells, place a hand over the heart and breathe. If fear spikes, list 3 outcomes you can influence. These micro-actions are habits of agency. Consequences are both immediate and long-term. An immediate consequence of oversharing is awkwardness. The stranger's eyes dart away, the conversation stalls, or false empathy fills the air and then evaporates. A longer-term consequence is reputation cost. Stories spread faster than intentions. A private night of despair turned public could be a serialized anecdote in the wrong hands. Avoiding these outcomes is not cold calculation, it is stewardship of personal narrative. Guarding the tour means choosing who is trusted to remember it. Recovery from past oversharing is possible. If a mistake has already been made, take ownership privately. Reach out to those affected and say succinctly, "That was shared poorly. I'm working on handling this differently. Thank you for your patience." This is not apology theater. This is correction. It signals maturity. People respect someone who recognizes error and adjusts. A daily discipline cements this work. Start with 3 practices. Morning journaling for 5 minutes, an afternoon pause practice of breath counting, and an evening 60-second check-in to note one boundary kept. Each small success compounds. Boundaries become familiar, the pause becomes reflex, and the urge to overshare loosens its grip. There is nobility in holding private pain and letting it refine, rather than define. A person who manages sorrow with intention demonstrates inner governance. That governance is not coldness. It is fidelity to self, to others, and to the work of living well. Pain needs companionship, not exposure. When struggle finds a proper vessel, it becomes raw material for growth rather than spectacle. The final measure of progress is quiet. Notice when relief comes from internal practices rather than external validation. Notice the steadiness in voice, the clarity in relationships, the fewer disruptions in daily life. These are the returns on restraint. Every time a private sorrow is placed in a trusted container instead of spilled across a public room, a small victory is claimed. The victories accumulate. Over time there is a deeper freedom. The freedom to be vulnerable without being vulnerable to harm, to be honest without being indiscreet, to seek help without handing your life to the first interested listener. Discipline in speech is a form of love for the future self. Speak with intention. Guard the story. Build rituals that transform impulse into wisdom. The ache will still arrive. The difference is that now the ache is met with skill. The relief comes not from public applause or momentary sympathy, but from a steady, deliberate practice that honors pain and protects the path forward. Number 2. Argue loudly with customer service. There is a moment when frustration simmers beneath the surface, a growing heat that pulses through the body. As a phone call drags on, an email goes unanswered, or a line at the service counter seems impossibly slow, the instinct to raise a voice, to slam your point into someone else's reality, is immediate and intoxicating. It feels like power, as if volume could bend the world to your will, as if insisting harder would create justice in the room. That instinct is seductive, but it is a mirage. Arguing loudly with customer service is rarely a path to resolution. It is a display of uncontrolled emotion, a surrender to impulse, and a subtle erosion of dignity. Beyond the immediate embarrassment, it sets habits that interfere with self-mastery and life effectiveness. Every interaction with customer service is an opportunity to exercise patience, clarity, and strategic communication. The loud argument is the untrained reflex, a reaction, not a plan. The first principle of restraint is awareness. Notice the sensations in the body: clenched jaw, rapid heartbeat, tightening chest. These are signals of the body preparing for battle, but the battle is not productive. Recognizing the physiological signs allows the mind to intervene before words are released into the air, words that cannot be taken back. The pause between impulse and action is not hesitation, it is a space where agency resides. Within that pause lies the ability to choose response over reaction, to convert frustration into influence rather than noise. The second principle is preparation. Life is a series of small conflicts, and customer service is often the front line where patience is tested. Approach these interactions with clarity about your goal. What is the desired outcome? A refund, a corrected bill, a replacement item? State it clearly in your mind before you speak. Clarity of objective shapes clarity of speech. When the mind knows exactly what it seeks, words become precise tools rather than emotional missiles. Avoid the trap of venting personal grievances. Focus on the transaction, not the drama. Loudness does not equal legitimacy. Precision does. Next comes the mastery of tone and language. Calmness is a skill that requires attention and repetition. A soft, steady voice conveys confidence far more persuasively than a raised one. Speak in declarative sentences. I received a defective item and need a replacement, instead of, you never send the right thing, and this is ridiculous. Notice the difference. One communicates a problem and a request. The other communicates anger and blame. Anger invites defensiveness. Precision invites collaboration. Effective communication is the subtle art of getting others to act while keeping them aligned with your purpose. Listening is the hidden power in every confrontation. Many people overlook this. Customer service representatives, despite their title, are human. They have limits, scripts, and rules. Listening carefully allows insight into what can actually be achieved within those limits. Ask questions calmly. Could you walk me through the replacement process? Or what steps do I need to follow to resolve this issue? Listening does not signify weakness. It signifies awareness. Awareness produces leverage. Each piece of information you gather shapes the strategy for resolution. Knowledge of process and limitation reduces wasted energy and emotional flare-ups. The act of restraint also reinforces reputation. Life is a series of repeated encounters, and your reputation precedes you even in small exchanges. Loud, aggressive confrontation signals impulsivity and lack of control. Controlled communication signals competence and reliability. Over time, cultivating the ability to maintain composure under stress transforms ordinary interactions into demonstrations of character. Character is cumulative. One calm resolution after another builds a foundation of respect, both from others and from yourself. Self-respect grows when actions align with deliberate principles rather than momentary impulses. Practical techniques to maintain composure are surprisingly simple, yet profoundly effective. Breathing remains the cornerstone. Deep, measured inhalations followed by slow exhalations. Engage the diaphragm, not just the chest. This physiological adjustment signals the nervous system to shift from fight or flight to problem-solving mode. Counting silently while listening to hold music or subtly repeating a calming phrase internally anchors focus. These small acts bridge the gap between raw emotion and strategic response. The body obeys attention, direct attention, and the body follows. Another technique involves language rehearsal. Anticipate the possible responses you might receive and craft concise statements for each. For example, if a refund is denied, the prepared statement could be, I understand the policy. Could you escalate this to a supervisor for review? Practicing these lines cultivates a form of mental armor. The mind becomes trained to respond rather than react. In every interaction, preparation transforms potential frustration into a performance of skill. Skill, unlike emotion, is repeatable and dependable. Empathy, surprisingly, amplifies effectiveness. Recognizing the person on the other side of the interaction as human, constrained by rules, procedures, and their own limitations, shifts the energy of the conversation. Empathy does not mean surrendering your rights or goals. It means framing requests in a way that aligns with the other person's capacity. I appreciate your help navigating this policy. Could you guide me through the next steps? Reframes a transactional dispute into cooperative problem-solving. Empathy reduces resistance and opens doors that confrontation would slam shut. Calm, respectful advocacy is persuasive in ways shouting never can be. Beyond immediate interactions, reflection builds mastery. After each encounter, consider, Did I maintain composure? Did I articulate my goal clearly? Did I listen actively? What could I do differently next time? This reflection is not self-criticism, it is iterative growth. Life presents countless small tests of discipline, and each resolved interaction strengthens emotional intelligence, resilience, and tactical communication skills. Mastery is not born in grand gestures, it is cultivated in the repeated handling of ordinary circumstances with care and precision. There is also a long-term mental benefit. Choosing calm over aggression reinforces neurological pathways that favor reasoning over reactivity. Over time, this reduces stress, improves decision-making, and deepens self-confidence. The person who handles conflict with poise does not fear confrontation. They approach it as an opportunity to exercise skill. This is the essence of personal power, not the ability to dominate others, but the ability to remain sovereign over one's own reactions, even under pressure. In practical terms, establish pre-engagement routines. Before calling or visiting a service desk, outline the issue in writing. Note the desired outcome and the points likely to arise. Allocate time for the conversation rather than approaching it in a rush. Enter the interaction with the physical body in a state of readiness, shoulders relaxed, spine erect, breathing slow. Small adjustments in posture, combined with mental clarity, create a foundation for controlled influence. The combination of preparation, calm speech, attentive listening, and empathetic framing converts a potentially explosive encounter into a productive, even empowering interaction. Loud arguments also erode self-trust. Each instance of losing temper diminishes confidence in one's ability to respond intentionally. Conversely, consistent practice of calm engagement strengthens self-efficacy. When the mind and body act in unison toward clear objectives, stress diminishes, goals are reached more reliably, and a sense of mastery emerges. This mastery extends beyond customer service interactions into professional, social, and personal arenas. The small practice of restraint multiplies, shaping behavior in countless areas of life. Finally, the reward is peace and efficiency. A composed interaction leads to faster resolutions, less emotional fatigue, and a sense of integrity preserved. Loudness may demand attention temporarily, but calmness secures outcomes and builds long-term trust. Each encounter becomes a rehearsal for life, a chance to refine emotional intelligence and communication skill. Over time, handling conflict without volume becomes second nature, a subtle yet powerful signal of maturity. The mind, body, and spirit align, and what was once a moment of potential shame transforms into a demonstration of character, discipline, and competence. Success in these interactions is measured not by the volume of argument, but by the clarity of outcome. Control over emotion is control over self. Control over self is freedom. Each customer service encounter, mundane as it may appear, is a proving ground for this freedom. Every calm word, every measured breath, every empathetic acknowledgement is a step toward mastery. The habit of restraint, when practiced consistently, builds not just resolution skills, but resilience, wisdom, and dignity. In the quiet precision of disciplined action lies a power far greater than any shout, the power to shape the world through composure, strategy, and unwavering self-governance. Number 3. Mock someone's appearance publicly. There is a fleeting temptation in public spaces to point, to laugh quietly behind a hand, to make a sharp remark about the way someone looks. It might be a comment on clothing, posture, weight, or hairstyle. The impulse can feel trivial, even amusing in the moment, but it carries consequences that ripple far beyond the seconds it takes to speak. Mocking someone's appearance publicly is a betrayal of basic human dignity, a surrender to ego, and a reflection of inner insecurity disguised as humor. It may provoke laughter among a few onlookers, but it leaves scars for the person targeted and stains the character of the one who mocks. To understand the weight of this action, consider the psychology behind it. Public mockery is rooted in comparison, an unconscious attempt to elevate oneself by diminishing another. It is a fragile kind of superiority, entirely dependent on someone else's perceived weakness. The satisfaction it provides is fleeting because it rests on an unstable foundation. Every time ridicule is used to assert dominance or humor, it builds an internal pattern, validation from others at the expense of empathy. This pattern erodes emotional intelligence, leaving the person reliant on external approval rather than cultivating authentic self-respect. From a Stoic perspective, mockery violates fundamental principles of rational conduct. Every person navigates life with struggles hidden beneath the surface. To attack appearance is to attack something that may be neither voluntary nor changeable. Hair thinning, body shape, scars, or physical quirks are often outside the sphere of control. Ridicule in these areas is not an act of correction, it is an act of harm. Wisdom involves recognizing the limits of judgment. Focus on what is within control, your own behavior, your own words, and your own moral character, and refrain from casting judgment on things beyond your governance. Practically speaking, restraint begins with awareness. Notice the subtle stirrings of judgment or amusement that might become mockery. These feelings often arise automatically, a reflex conditioned by social media, peer banter, or cultural norms. Pause before speaking. Let the sensation settle. Ask internally, does this comment build connection or create division? Does it reflect strength or insecurity? By creating even a momentary gap between impulse and action, it becomes possible to choose dignity over derision. Another critical strategy is empathy. Visualize the person being observed, not as a target, but as a fully realized human being with their own fears, desires, and vulnerabilities. Recognize that public spaces are shared territories where everyone deserves respect. Empathy transforms perception. What once triggered a mocking impulse now evokes compassion or neutrality. This shift is not sentimental. It is a tactical recalibration that enhances social intelligence. Over time, the mind becomes trained to see people as agents rather than objects of amusement. Language practice further reinforces restraint. Replace instinctive comments with neutral or positive observations. For instance, instead of fixating on what appears wrong, acknowledge effort or creativity. That's a bold choice of color, or remain silent entirely. Silence is a sign of self-control, not passivity. It signals that the speaker is deliberate, not impulsive. Choosing words that affirm or simply observe without judgment cultivates a reputation for reliability, kindness, and emotional mastery. The small discipline of measured language extends into broader life interactions, reducing conflict and increasing trust. The social consequences of mocking appearance are immediate and profound. Public ridicule often draws attention, but rarely in the way intended. The mocked person may experience shame, embarrassment, or anger, and onlookers may perceive the speaker as cruel, insecure, or socially tone-deaf. Reputation in public spaces is cumulative. One careless comment can shadow future encounters, coloring how strangers, colleagues, or acquaintances perceive character. Conversely, consistent respect and measured speech build social capital. People remember calmness, fairness, and poise far longer than a clever insult delivered in haste. Reflection is another tool. After moments when a mocking thought arises, mentally replay the scenario and explore alternative responses. Could humor be redirected inward rather than outward? Could curiosity replace judgment? Could observation remain purely descriptive rather than evaluative? These reflective practices create a mental rehearsal that strengthens future responses. Each mental exercise increases awareness and gradually diminishes automatic derision. The mind becomes a garden cultivated for intentionality rather than a jungle overrun with reflexive judgment. Developing self-worth independent of diminishing others is crucial. The urge to mock often stems from insecurity or the need for social validation. Engaging in personal growth practices, reading, journaling, skill development, mindfulness, shifts the source of satisfaction inward. When self-esteem is internalized, external comparison loses its power. The need to elevate oneself by lowering someone else diminishes naturally. Character becomes measured by actions rather than by fleeting applause or laughter from peers. Inner confidence is the antidote to public derision. Visualization techniques reinforce empathy and discipline. Imagine a stranger as a child, a parent, or a friend. Consider how words spoken lightly in jest might be received if directed at someone deeply loved. This exercise activates compassion circuits in the brain, transforming reflexive mockery into deliberate observation or silence. Mental rehearsal is a low-risk environment where moral habits are formed. Over time, these exercises become automatic, reducing the cognitive load required to respond ethically in real situations. Another approach is setting personal rules for speech. Establish non-negotiable boundaries. Never comment on weight, physical anomalies, or personal grooming in public. Treat these boundaries like laws in your internal governance. When a mocking thought surfaces, consciously remind yourself of the rule, "I do not speak of appearance in public." This internal law creates consistency and reduces reliance on willpower alone. Self-discipline is cumulative, and consistent enforcement of boundaries strengthens character. Humility is a silent guardian against public mockery. Recognize that appearance is transient and context-specific. What seems laughable today may shift tomorrow. Everyone has vulnerabilities, and circumstance often shapes perception more than choice. A humble perspective encourages patience, tolerance, and restraint. It turns attention away from judgment and toward observation, curiosity, and appreciation of diversity. Humility fosters social grace, which in turn cultivates personal resilience and lasting respect. Finally, the act of restraint is transformative. Each decision to withhold mockery builds integrity, strengthens empathy, and cultivates emotional intelligence. The person who consistently practices respect becomes a model in public spaces, influencing peers through example rather than through correction or critique. Life is a series of interactions. Each one offers an opportunity to exercise virtue. By treating others with dignity, even in trivial moments, the practice of character deepens. Over time, the skill of responding with empathy and discretion in public becomes second nature, a quiet yet powerful testament to self-mastery. The consequence of this discipline is not just ethical alignment but practical benefit. People are drawn to those who uplift rather than demean. Relationships strengthen, opportunities increase, and the social environment becomes safer and more cooperative. Respect earns respect. Every avoided remark, every silent judgment, every empathetic thought compounds into a life marked by thoughtful influence rather than fleeting amusement. Mockery may feel easy and instinctive, but the rewards of restraint, patience, and compassion are lasting, profound, and empowering. Through intentional action and deliberate thought, the practice of never mocking appearance publicly becomes a cornerstone of character, social intelligence, and enduring personal growth. Number 4. Display explosive anger without control. Anger is an elemental force rising swiftly and with a velocity that can feel unstoppable. It is like a wildfire in the chest, flames licking the throat and igniting muscles, demanding release. The impulse to lash out, to shout, to throw, to slam is primal and immediate. In public, that surge of emotion transforms rapidly from internal discomfort into a spectacle, a vivid display that captures attention but sacrifices control, dignity, and often long-term relationships. Explosive anger without control is one of the most destructive habits a person can carry. It is not merely an inconvenience. It is a quiet erosion of character, self-respect, and personal influence. The first step to mastering anger is recognizing its mechanics. The body reacts before the mind can reason. Heart rate spikes, breathing becomes shallow and rapid, muscles tighten, and the voice rises involuntarily. Awareness of these physiological cues is essential. Observing the sensation of heat in the chest, the tension in the jaw, and the prickling sensation in the hands provides an early warning system. The mind must step in immediately, not as a suppressor, but as a guide. Explosive reactions often occur because this space for intervention is absent. Pause, even for a breath or two. That pause is where agency exists. Understanding the triggers of anger is equally important. Most public eruptions are not solely reactions to external events. They are responses amplified by unresolved personal stress, unmet expectations, and habitual thinking patterns. External stimuli, a rude remark, a slow cashier, an inconvenient delay, ignite a chain reaction that is deeply personal. A moment of awareness reveals that anger often says less about the external actor and more about internal interpretation. The person who reacts explosively believes an affront exists, but frequently it is a narrative created by perception rather than fact. Mastery begins with distinguishing stimulus from judgment. Practical strategies for immediate control are both simple and profound. The first is physical redirection. Move away from the trigger when possible, even a few steps. Change posture to open the chest and slow the shoulders. Tense muscles signal the brain that conflict is imminent. Relaxing those muscles communicates safety. Inhale deeply through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 2. Exhale through the mouth for 6. This deliberate breathing slows heart rate, lowers adrenaline response, and increases clarity. The body, once calm, allows the mind to regain focus and strategic thought. Verbal restraint is another cornerstone. Explosive speech is difficult to retract and often carries consequences far beyond the immediate situation. Choosing to speak slowly, deliberately, and with measured tone reduces the emotional heat of the moment. Short, neutral statements, such as "I need a moment" or "let's revisit this later," diffuse tension while preserving dignity. These phrases are not evasions. They are instruments of control. Each word, chosen carefully, reinforces mastery over impulse and prevents the chaos of reactive expression from dictating the narrative. Emotional rehearsal strengthens control over time. Visualizing potential scenarios where frustration could escalate allows for mental preparation. Imagine a crowded line, an argument with a colleague, or a public mistake that sparks irritation. Mentally run through responses that maintain calmness, focusing on breathing, posture, and measured speech. The rehearsal rewires automatic responses. When a real situation arises, the mind accesses a trained response rather than surrendering to instinct. Habitual visualization is like physical training for the nervous system, conditioning it to respond with skill instead of reflex. Another layer of mastery is reflective assessment after incidents. If anger is displayed publicly, examine the event with honesty. What triggered the emotion? What physical or mental cues preceded the eruption? How could the situation have been handled differently? Reflection is not self-punishment. It is data collection for self-improvement. Each incident is a laboratory where control is tested and understanding grows. The repeated practice of review strengthens neural pathways that favor composure over reaction. Long-term cultivation of patience reduces the frequency of explosive outbursts. Life constantly presents minor annoyances and delays, and responding to each with intensity is unsustainable. Engaging in practices such as meditation, mindful walking, or journaling develops baseline emotional stability. Training the mind to accept small irritations without escalation creates resilience. The person who has mastered patience experiences fewer triggers and responds more strategically when challenges arise. Patience is both shield and sword. It protects from impulsive behavior while empowering deliberate action. Accountability is an essential aspect of managing anger. Explosive reactions often damage relationships and reputations. Making amends, apologizing when appropriate, and committing to alternative behaviors reinforce responsibility. Accountability is also internal, setting clear personal standards for emotional conduct, reviewing adherence to those standards, and adjusting strategies when necessary. The individual who takes ownership of their reactions strengthens self-trust and credibility. Respect from others follows naturally when consistent integrity is demonstrated. Cognitive reframing is a tool of subtle but profound power. When confronted with irritation, ask, will this matter in a week, a month, or a year? This perspective shrinks the significance of minor provocations, shifting focus from immediate emotional satisfaction to long-term rational outcomes. Explosive anger often arises when minor grievances are inflated in the mind. Reframing restores proportionality, allowing a strategic rather than reactive approach. The Stoic principle of separating perception from reality is central here. What occurs externally is neutral. Judgment shapes the storm. Social modeling reinforces self-discipline. Observing individuals who remain calm under pressure provides practical templates for behavior. Notice posture, tone, timing, and choice of words. Model these behaviors in small interactions and gradually in higher stakes scenarios. Human behavior is often learned through imitation. Aligning observation with deliberate practice accelerates mastery. The ability to emulate calm in challenging moments trains both mind and body to respond intentionally. Anger itself can be transformed into constructive energy. Channeling frustration into action, creativity, or problem-solving converts destructive impulses into productive outcomes. For instance, instead of shouting at a delayed service provider, use the energy to organize a solution-oriented request. Redirected energy reinforces control and demonstrates resilience. The mind learns that intense emotions are tools, not tyrants. Discipline converts natural force into sustainable advantage. Boundaries and preemptive planning are also critical. Recognize situations that consistently trigger explosive reactions and prepare strategies ahead of time. If a specific coworker consistently provokes irritation, plan responses in advance. Determine phrases, breathing techniques, or temporary withdrawal strategies. Pre-planning reduces reliance on raw willpower and increases consistency of composure. Preparation transforms unpredictability into controlled, measured encounters. Finally, internal narrative shapes behavior. The stories told to oneself about events dictate emotional response. Replace narratives that justify explosive behavior with narratives that emphasize resilience, control, and integrity. Instead of telling the mind, I can't stand this, say, this is challenging but I can respond wisely. Self-directed narratives are not passive affirmations, they are frameworks for decision-making that govern action in real time. Over repeated practice, these frameworks internalize, producing automatic composure and reducing the risk of public eruptions. The cumulative effect of these practices is profound. Each moment of restraint, each deliberate breath, each measured response, and each reflective insight compounds into a habit of mastery. Explosive anger loses its grip, replaced by a steady, intentional presence that commands respect. Public interactions become stages for deliberate influence rather than uncontrolled display. Life is increasingly navigated with clarity, patience, and strategic foresight. Control over anger is not suppression, it is liberation. It transforms raw energy into disciplined action, chaos into order, and impulsivity into enduring strength. Over time, the person who chooses mastery over eruption builds resilience, respect, and a quiet power that echoes far beyond any single public moment. Number 5. Invade personal space intentionally. Personal space is an invisible boundary, unique to every individual, that defines comfort, security, and autonomy. Crossing it intentionally, moving too close to someone in a conversation, lingering uncomfortably near in a line, or leaning into another person's presence without invitation, is more than a minor social misstep. It is a violation of trust and respect. The body reacts instinctively to intrusion, shoulders tense, chest tightens, heartbeat accelerates, and a subtle defensive posture emerges. When personal space is disregarded deliberately, it communicates aggression, dominance, or disregard, whether conscious or not. The consequences are immediate discomfort, tension, and erosion of social harmony, and the long-term effects extend into reputation and self-perception. Understanding why people guard personal space is essential. Boundaries are a manifestation of both psychological and physical safety. Humans are wired to detect proximity, to feel threatened when it is encroached upon, and to react defensively. These instincts are not arbitrary, they are rooted in survival and social cohesion. Ignoring these boundaries is perceived, often subconsciously, as a challenge or threat. Intentional invasion of space triggers anxiety, irritability, and heightened alertness in the other person, and it compromises your ability to communicate effectively. The person whose space is encroached becomes less receptive, more guarded, and less cooperative. The moment loses potential for connection and dialogue. The first principle of restraint is awareness of the self in relation to others. In any public or semi-public setting, recognize the invisible radius around every individual. Observe reactions, subtle shifts backward, shoulder movements, or eye flickers that signal discomfort. These cues are feedback. Acting on them demonstrates both empathy and intelligence. Self-consciousness in spatial awareness is not self-limiting, it is socially liberating, allowing for interactions that respect autonomy while maintaining presence. Mastery of social space begins with noticing the signals that others send without words. Intentionality in movement is a practical strategy. When approaching or interacting, maintain a respectful distance that allows comfort while engaging fully. A step back, a slight lean away, or maintaining an open stance communicates both respect and confidence. Physical awareness transforms interactions from potential conflict into deliberate connection. The person who understands spatial dynamics can navigate crowded environments, negotiations, or intimate conversations without causing tension or anxiety. Conscious movement conveys control and builds trust, rather than fear or irritation. Verbal reinforcement complements spatial awareness. Words and tone can soften or intensify the perception of proximity. A warm, inclusive statement delivered with gentle, calm tone reduces the perceived intrusion of closeness. Conversely, a harsh or abrupt tone magnifies discomfort. Every action in proximity carries meaning beyond the physical distance. Choosing words carefully, in conjunction with deliberate spacing, transforms potential hostility into cooperation. Language and movement are inseparable in the dance of human interaction. Empathy is the cornerstone of managing personal space responsibly. Place yourself in the position of another. How does it feel to have someone stand closer than is comfortable, to feel their presence encroach upon a private boundary? The answer guides behavior. Ethical interaction requires honoring invisible lines that protect psychological comfort. Empathy does not merely prevent conflict, it cultivates social intelligence. Observing others' reactions and adjusting distance fosters communication that is effective, respectful, and enduring. Social harmony is created when each person's comfort is prioritized alongside your own objectives. Cognitive rehearsal strengthens these habits. Visualize a crowded train, a bustling cafe, or a busy office. Imagine moving through these spaces without violating anyone's personal sphere. Practice entering conversations and lines without unnecessary proximity. Anticipate moments when accidental encroachment is likely and plan adjustments. A step to the side, a pause before approaching, or a slight shift in posture. Mental rehearsal reduces reactive movement and increases fluidity in social interactions. The disciplined mind anticipates spatial dynamics and responds deliberately. Long-term awareness also involves understanding cultural and individual differences. Personal space is not universal. What is comfortable for one person may be intolerable for another. In multicultural or diverse settings, default to generous spacing until cues indicate openness. Observe gestures, facial expressions, and tone as guides. This nuanced attention demonstrates sophistication, emotional intelligence, and respect. Ignoring these subtleties risks alienation and undermines the ability to connect meaningfully. Internal regulation is a parallel skill to spatial awareness. The urge to invade space often arises from impatience, desire for dominance, or unconscious assertion of authority. The mind must redirect these impulses through deliberate self-talk and cognitive framing. For example, when the instinct to lean too close or to hover arises, consciously remind yourself, proximity is not required for influence or effectiveness. Distance does not weaken presence. It strengthens perception of control, professionalism, and respect. Restraint in physical behavior reflects mastery of self as much as of others. Physical exercises reinforce this discipline. Practice moving in confined spaces with mindfulness, maintaining balance, posture, and appropriate distance from others. Observe how subtle changes in stance or step size affect interactions. Develop spatial sensitivity through everyday movement. Walking past strangers, engaging in cues, or negotiating shared spaces, while keeping awareness of the invisible buffer surrounding each person. This sensory training enhances natural social intelligence, making respect for boundaries instinctive rather than forced. Consequences of invading space intentionally extend beyond immediate discomfort. Social perception is cumulative. A reputation for ignoring personal boundaries signals aggression, arrogance, or insensitivity. Relationships are strained, cooperation declines, and opportunities diminish. People naturally gravitate toward those who respect boundaries, finding comfort and safety in interactions. The disciplined observer who honors space is trusted, approachable, and persuasive. Respect for physical limits becomes a cornerstone of social credibility, influencing both personal and professional spheres. Reflection consolidates growth. After any interaction, consider whether your behavior respected spatial norms. Note instances where you misjudged distance and explore strategies for improvement. Reflection is a feedback loop that converts experience into practical knowledge. Each adjustment refines instinctive responses, increasing the likelihood of harmonious engagement in future encounters. The mind that continuously evaluates its actions develops both precision and awareness, reducing the likelihood of unintentional intrusion. Preemptive strategies prevent conflict and reinforce discipline. In crowded or unpredictable environments, anticipate challenges. An elevator, a line at a service desk, or a busy corridor. Position yourself consciously to maintain adequate distance. Communicate intent through body language. Open palms, relaxed posture, and gentle gestures, which signal respect for others' autonomy. Anticipation reduces reactive behavior and cultivates calm authority, allowing interactions to flow smoothly. The habit of respecting personal space fosters broader life skills. Attention to boundaries enhances listening, observation, and empathy. It cultivates patience and encourages a deliberate approach to interaction. These qualities translate into leadership, negotiation, and collaboration. Mastery of spatial awareness is a microcosm of self-mastery. Controlling impulses, observing environments, and aligning actions with ethical principles. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to exercise discipline, refine perception, and influence effectively. Finally, the reward of consistent restraint is subtle but profound. People respond positively to those who honor their comfort. Interactions become cooperative rather than confrontational, influence is achieved without force, and presence is recognized without intrusion. The person who respects boundaries develops a reputation for thoughtfulness, emotional intelligence, and reliability. Personal satisfaction grows as self-control over impulses translates into freedom from reactive behavior and conflict. The disciplined practice of maintaining respectful space is not merely social etiquette, it is a demonstration of character, awareness, and long-term personal growth. Through observation, empathy, preparation, and reflection, the mastery of personal space becomes a foundation for harmonious relationships, effective communication, and enduring respect. Number 6. Use speakerphone for private calls. There is a certain audacity in speaking loudly into a speakerphone in a public place, whether on a crowded train, in a cafe, or walking down a busy street. The sound of one's own voice becomes amplified, unfiltered, and unavoidable, imposing itself on everyone nearby. Conversations meant to be private spill into shared space, revealing intimate details, frustrations, and opinions to strangers who have no role in the dialogue. Using a speakerphone carelessly transforms a personal exchange into a public performance, often without awareness of the disruption it causes or the risks it entails. What feels convenient in the moment, freeing the hands, projecting authority, or multitasking, carries consequences that extend beyond minor annoyance. It is a choice to broadcast private matters, and with it comes loss of discretion, credibility, and social grace. The first principle of mindfulness in communication is recognizing the shared auditory space. Public environments are inhabited by strangers who do not consent to overhearing personal or professional conversations. Speakerphones violate this unspoken social contract. Attention to how one's voice propagates, the volume of speech, and the sensitivity of content are central to practicing restraint. The brain may perceive multitasking as efficiency, but socially it manifests as intrusion. Awareness of the audience, even if composed of unknown individuals, is a form of respect and a safeguard of reputation. Understanding the risks of oversharing over speakerphone is equally critical. Private calls frequently involve information that is sensitive, whether financial, relational, or professional. When transmitted through an open speaker, these details are vulnerable to misinterpretation, judgment, or exploitation. Strangers absorb fragments of the conversation, construct assumptions, and may act on them unpredictably. Once information is public, control over its context is lost. The impulse to speak aloud for convenience must be weighed against potential consequences, a practice of prudence that cultivates foresight and discretion. Practical discipline begins with evaluating the necessity of speakerphone use. Alternatives exist in almost every scenario: using a headset, holding the phone to the ear, stepping aside to a quieter area, or scheduling the conversation for a private moment. Each alternative preserves control over what is shared and ensures the conversation remains intentional rather than imposed on others. Convenience is seductive, but the long-term benefits of privacy and professionalism outweigh the fleeting ease of an open speaker. Vocal restraint is another critical component. Even when speakerphone seems unavoidable, moderating volume and pacing reduces exposure. Lowering the voice, enunciating deliberately, and pausing between statements decreases the amount of auditory space consumed. Each syllable is a choice. The conscious shaping of sound demonstrates self-control. In public, the ear is a shared organ, and using it responsibly reflects both maturity and ethical consideration. Empathy plays a central role in mastering public communication. Imagine being on the receiving end of another's broadcasted conversation. Personal conflicts, complaints, and intimate details forced into the air without consent. The discomfort, irritation, or judgment felt in that scenario mirrors what is projected to strangers when a speakerphone is used carelessly. Placing oneself in the position of others heightens awareness and motivates deliberate restraint. Empathy transforms an automatic convenience into a conscious, ethical decision. Routine practices can reinforce this discipline. Establish habits of checking surroundings before using speakerphone, scanning the environment, assessing background noise, and identifying the presence of others. If others are near, default to private communication. Over time, this becomes an intuitive reflex rather than a calculated effort. The habitual consideration of space, privacy, and social impact strengthens both self-discipline and social intelligence. Cognitive strategies support practical restraint. Before speaking, ask, is this necessary to broadcast publicly? Could this be summarized, postponed, or moved to a private channel? Is the content sensitive or potentially misinterpreted? These reflective questions create a mental checkpoint that interrupts automatic behavior. Conscious deliberation transforms a casual convenience into a disciplined choice, preserving integrity while facilitating necessary communication. Technology itself can be leveraged to enhance privacy and control. Noise-canceling headphones, earbuds with integrated microphones, and secure messaging platforms allow multitasking without imposing on public space. The intentional adoption of these tools reflects foresight and strategic thinking. Convenience need not come at the expense of respect or discretion. The disciplined individual leverages resources to achieve both efficiency and propriety, demonstrating mastery over circumstance rather than submission to impulse. The consequences of ignoring these principles are tangible. Repeated public exposure of private information undermines credibility and trust. Colleagues, friends, and strangers may perceive indiscretion, judgment, or thoughtlessness. Patterns of careless communication shape reputation, sometimes subtly but persistently, limiting influence and authority. Conversely, conscientious management of conversation enhances reliability, trustworthiness, and perceived competence. Public restraint signals both ethical awareness and emotional intelligence. Internal regulation strengthens external behavior. The urge to use speakerphone often arises from impatience, desire for efficiency, or need for visibility. These impulses require conscious redirection. Simple techniques, such as breathing before dialing, visualizing the audience, or physically relocating to a private area, interrupt the automatic trajectory toward exposure. Over time, these interventions become instinctive, embedding a pattern of intentional, responsible communication that extends across all forms of interaction. Reflection consolidates growth. After each public or semi-public conversation, review adherence to privacy principles. Identify moments where boundaries were respected or breached. Analyze triggers, physical context, and emotional states that influenced behavior. Reflection converts experience into actionable insight, reinforcing mental habits and improving judgment. Each episode becomes a stepping stone toward a consistently disciplined approach to communication. The broader implications of speakerphone etiquette extend beyond immediate interactions. Mastery of this behavior nurtures respect for other boundaries, encourages mindful attention, and cultivates an awareness of shared spaces. It becomes a microcosm for larger life disciplines, managing impulses, honoring others, and exercising foresight. Each conversation becomes a practical exercise in character development, reinforcing the capacity for self-control in diverse contexts. Finally, adopting these habits provides tangible benefits. Conversations remain private, sensitive information is protected, and public spaces are shared respectfully. Social perception is enhanced, demonstrating responsibility and awareness. Internal satisfaction grows as impulses are redirected toward constructive, intentional choices. Communication becomes a tool for influence, clarity, and professionalism rather than a vehicle for distraction or disruption. The deliberate practice of privacy-conscious interaction transforms ordinary moments into demonstrations of discipline, foresight, and ethical consideration, cultivating both personal and social integrity. Number 7. Publicly humiliate someone for power. The urge to assert dominance by belittling someone publicly is older than human civilization itself. Across workplaces, social gatherings, and online platforms, the spectacle of humiliation is often mistaken for power. A sharp word, a mocking gesture, a pointed criticism delivered in front of others can elicit immediate attention, laughter, or compliance. At first glance, it feels effective. Control is established, authority asserted, and onlookers reminded of hierarchy. Yet beneath this fleeting sensation lies a profound erosion of trust, respect, and moral integrity. Publicly humiliating someone is a transaction that sacrifices long-term influence for the illusion of immediate superiority. True power is cultivated quietly with strategic foresight and ethical conduct, not through coercion or spectacle. Understanding why humiliation is tempting requires honesty with oneself. The impulse often arises from insecurity, fear of inadequacy, or the desire to mask personal vulnerabilities. When someone feels threatened, public shaming becomes a defensive weapon. It creates a temporary imbalance, momentarily elevating the aggressor while diminishing the target. Yet this imbalance is illusory. Strength built on the pain of another is fragile, unstable, and often exposed under scrutiny. Genuine authority grows from competence, empathy, and ethical action, not from the transient satisfaction of seeing someone flinch. A fundamental principle in resisting this impulse is empathy. Place yourself in the position of the one being humiliated. Imagine the physical sensations: a tightening of the chest, a flush of heat across the face, a sudden constriction of speech. Picture the mental weight, embarrassment, fear, confusion, and a sense of isolation in front of others. Public shaming wounds not only immediate dignity but also leaves lingering scars that affect self-esteem, motivation, and social trust. Awareness of the profound human cost reframes the act from a tool of power to a destructive choice that harms both parties. Practical self-regulation begins with emotional awareness. Anger, frustration, or competitiveness often fuel the desire to humiliate. By observing these emotions in the body, The quickening heartbeat, the clenched jaw, the rush of tension in the hands. The mind can intervene before action is taken. Pause deliberately, even if only for a breath or two, and evaluate the consequences of speech or action. This pause transforms impulsive aggression into conscious strategy. The choice to act ethically, even under provocation, is a demonstration of inner strength, far more convincing than any public display of superiority. Language management is critical. Words wield enormous power. They can uplift or destroy. Before speaking, assess whether the communication serves a constructive purpose or merely amplifies ego. Even criticism can be delivered privately, focusing on actionable behavior rather than personal attack. Phrasing such as, "I noticed a challenge here, let's explore solutions together," maintains authority and encourages improvement without public degradation. This approach builds respect, preserves relationships, and fosters long-term influence, whereas humiliation alienates allies, fosters resentment, and undermines credibility. Awareness of audience perception adds another layer of discipline. Onlookers rarely interpret public humiliation as strength. Many observe silently, noting cruelty rather than competence. The individual who resorts to shaming may provoke compliance in the short term, but respect and loyalty erode. Over time, repeated displays of humiliation cultivate a reputation for instability, pettiness, or insecurity. True leadership, by contrast, is measured and empathetic, inspiring voluntary cooperation rather than fear. Reputation is a currency more enduring than momentary attention. It is strengthened through consistent ethical behavior and eroded through displays of dominance at others' expense. Preparation and reflection are practical strategies for long-term mastery. Consider potential scenarios where humiliation might feel tempting during meetings, debates, or disagreements. Mentally rehearse alternative responses, assert boundaries, redirect conversations, or express disapproval constructively. After interactions, reflect honestly. Did my behavior elevate understanding or diminish trust? Could the situation have been managed without harm? Regular mental rehearsal and reflection condition responses, making ethical action the default rather than the exception. Internal narrative is equally powerful. The stories told to oneself about authority, respect, and strength shape behavior. A narrative rooted in fear of inadequacy or need for external validation fuels humiliation. In contrast, framing authority as a responsibility to guide, support, and model ethical conduct fosters patience, empathy, and self-control. Reinforcing this narrative daily through affirmations of competence and integrity strengthens resilience against impulses to dominate through shame. The social and psychological consequences of public humiliation are profound. Targets of public degradation experience decreased motivation, anxiety, and social withdrawal. The act erodes trust within teams, friendships, and networks. Witnesses internalize lessons as well. They learn that authority is associated with fear rather than respect, discouraging collaboration and fostering a culture of caution and guarded interaction. By choosing restraint, one promotes healthier relationships, a cooperative environment, and enduring influence. Practical techniques for maintaining composure include grounding and breathing exercises. Before responding in emotionally charged situations, focus on slow, deliberate inhalations and exhalations. Feel the body's weight and posture, and intentionally relax tense muscles. This physiological reset dampens the emotional charge and provides clarity for constructive decision-making. Physical awareness becomes a tool for ethical consistency, reinforcing the mind's capacity to act thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Another strategy involves focusing on shared goals rather than personal dominance. In professional or social settings, public shaming rarely achieves meaningful outcomes. By orienting communication toward problem-solving, mutual understanding, or collaborative progress, authority is exercised through guidance rather than coercion. Leadership through example, reason, and ethical influence is more effective and enduring than leadership enforced through humiliation. Empowerment can also be practiced through encouragement rather than degradation. When challenges arise, offering support, constructive critique, or mentorship achieves both outcomes. Authority is established and others are strengthened. This approach multiplies influence without sacrificing moral integrity. Every instance of restraint reinforces a reputation for fairness, empathy, and strategic competence. Boundaries further reinforce ethical conduct. Determine personal principles regarding communication and behavior publicly and privately. Internalize these principles to create automatic adherence even under stress. Boundaries act as internal guardrails, ensuring that ethical behavior persists regardless of circumstance, temptation, or provocation. The consistent application of principles demonstrates discipline and self-mastery, attributes far more enduring than temporary displays of superiority. Finally, the reward of avoiding public humiliation is profound. Influence becomes authentic, relationships deepen, trust is maintained, and self-respect strengthens. Ethical authority commands lasting loyalty, cooperation, and admiration. The disciplined practice of restraint fosters a life marked by integrity rather than fleeting dominance. True power is revealed not in moments of public spectacle, but in the quiet, deliberate, and ethical decisions that guide action, shape perception, and cultivate enduring respect. By refusing to humiliate others for personal gain, the individual asserts mastery over ego, enhances social intelligence, and builds a legacy of strength rooted in character rather than fear. Number 8. Record people without their consent. There is a quiet shift that happens the moment a phone is lifted and a camera begins recording without permission. The air changes. Trust collapses. What was once a human interaction becomes a captured moment, stripped of context and dignity, frozen for potential misuse. Recording people without their consent is often justified as harmless, protective, or entertaining, yet beneath those rationalizations lies a profound ethical failure. It converts people into objects, moments into commodities, and private vulnerability into public material. What feels like control in the moment often becomes a long-term liability to character, credibility, and conscience. The ease of modern technology makes this behavior deceptively simple. A single tap can preserve voices, faces, and emotions indefinitely. This convenience dulls moral awareness. The absence of immediate consequences creates the illusion that the act is neutral, even justified. Yet neutrality disappears when perspective shifts. To be recorded unknowingly is to be stripped of agency. It removes the right to choose how one is seen, heard, or remembered. That loss of agency is not trivial. It is a violation of personal sovereignty, the same principle that underpins respect, consent, and trust in all meaningful human relationships. At the core of this issue is power imbalance. The person recording holds control over narrative, timing, and distribution. The recorded individual becomes exposed, vulnerable to interpretation without defense. This imbalance is not strength, it is exploitation. Stoic wisdom emphasizes restraint in the use of power. Power exercised without justice corrodes the character of the one who wields it. Recording without consent is not an act of awareness. It is an act of dominance disguised as documentation. Practical discipline begins with intention. Before activating a camera or recorder, pause and ask why. Is the purpose to protect, to clarify, or to embarrass? Is there an alternative that preserves dignity while achieving the same objective? Many situations that tempt secret recording can be resolved through direct communication, written notes, or disengagement. Choosing restraint does not weaken position, it strengthens moral authority. The ability to refrain when temptation exists is a marker of self-mastery. Full awareness of emotional triggers is essential. Recording without consent often arises from heightened emotion, anger during conflict, excitement in unusual moments, or fear of being misunderstood. These emotions narrow perception and justify impulsive behavior. Recognizing emotional intensity as a signal to slow down prevents irreversible decisions. A calm mind sees options that a reactive mind cannot. Emotional regulation becomes a safeguard against ethical missteps that cannot be undone once recorded. Empathy deepens this restraint. Imagine discovering that a private moment, an awkward interaction, or a vulnerable conversation was captured without knowledge and shared beyond control. The sense of betrayal is immediate and lasting. Trust fractures not only with the individual who recorded, but with the environment itself. Public spaces feel unsafe. Conversations become guarded. This ripple effect damages social cohesion. Ethical behavior requires anticipating this harm and choosing actions that protect collective trust rather than undermine it. Consent is not merely a legal concept, it is a moral one. It communicates respect for autonomy and acknowledges shared humanity. Seeking consent, even when it feels inconvenient, affirms equality. It transforms recording from a covert act into a collaborative one. When consent is given, power equalizes. When it is absent, exploitation fills the void. Practicing consent consistently trains the mind toward ethical clarity and reinforces trust as a foundational value. Practical alternatives exist and should be cultivated. If documentation is necessary, ask permission plainly and respectfully. If the situation feels unsafe, remove yourself rather than capturing evidence in secrecy. If memory is the concern, write down impressions privately. Each alternative preserves dignity while maintaining personal boundaries. The disciplined individual selects options that align with values rather than impulses. Reflection is a powerful corrective tool. Consider moments when the urge to record arises. Analyze the underlying motivation. Was it curiosity, validation, fear, or control? Understanding motivation weakens its grip. Patterns emerge through reflection, allowing intentional interruption of future impulses. Over time, awareness replaces reaction, and ethical consistency becomes habitual rather than forced. The social consequences of recording without consent are severe and often underestimated. Relationships fracture, reputations suffer, and credibility erodes. Even when recordings are justified internally, external perception is rarely forgiving. People remember violations of privacy long after intentions are forgotten. Trust, once broken, is slow to rebuild. By contrast, consistent respect for boundaries builds a reputation for integrity, discretion, and reliability. These traits attract trust and open doors that manipulation never will. Internal narrative plays a crucial role. The story told to oneself about entitlement, justice, or exposure shapes behavior. Replace narratives that justify covert recording with ones grounded in principle. Dignity matters. Consent matters. Restraint is strength. These internal narratives guide behavior even under pressure. Over time, they become automatic, shaping instinctive responses that align with ethical values. Mindfulness in daily interactions reinforces this discipline. Treat every conversation, every shared moment, as temporary and sacred, unless mutually agreed otherwise. This mindset reduces the urge to capture, archive, or expose. Presence replaces preservation. Experience becomes valued for its impact rather than its potential for display. Living fully in the moment diminishes the compulsion to record it at the expense of others. Boundaries must be defined internally. Decide in advance the circumstances under which recording is acceptable and those under which it is not. Commit to these boundaries as non-negotiable. Boundaries eliminate ambiguity and reduce impulsive decision-making. When temptation arises, the decision has already been made. This pre-commitment strengthens discipline and ensures consistency across situations. Education and awareness further support ethical behavior. Understanding the emotional, psychological, and social impact of unauthorized recording sharpens moral sensitivity. It reframes the act from a harmless habit to a meaningful violation. Knowledge deepens responsibility. Responsibility shapes action. Action, repeated, becomes character. The long-term benefits of restraint are profound. Relationships become safer and more open. Conversations deepen. Trust flourishes. The individual who respects privacy earns confidence from others and peace within. Self-respect grows when actions align with values, reducing internal conflict and regret. Ethical consistency simplifies life, removing the burden of justification and concealment. Ultimately, recording people without their consent is not about technology, it is about character. Technology merely reveals tendencies that already exist. Choosing not to record when one could is a declaration of principle. It asserts that dignity outweighs convenience, that humanity surpasses content, and that integrity is worth more than momentary leverage. Each restrained action reinforces mastery over impulse and affirms a commitment to ethical living. The quiet strength of restraint rarely draws applause, yet it builds something far more enduring: trust, credibility, and inner alignment. In a world eager to capture and expose, the disciplined choice to protect privacy stands out as a mark of wisdom. By honoring consent, practicing empathy, and exercising control, one cultivates a life governed not by impulse or exploitation, but by respect, foresight, and enduring self-mastery. Number 9. Treat service workers as inferior. There is a subtle yet pervasive danger in viewing service workers as inferior, as if their role in society diminishes their value as human beings. The impulse to speak down, rush, or dismiss their efforts is often unconscious, fueled by assumptions of status, impatience, or self-importance. Yet every interaction with someone providing a service, whether a cashier, a barista, a flight attendant, or a janitor, is a mirror reflecting character, discipline, and empathy. Treating service workers as lesser not only inflicts immediate discomfort and humiliation, but also erodes moral integrity, diminishes social awareness, and damages one's long-term reputation. Human dignity does not fluctuate with occupation. Every person, regardless of role, deserves acknowledgement, courtesy, and respect. Service workers operate in highly visible, emotionally demanding, and often underappreciated environments. Their labor sustains the functionality of society, facilitates comfort, and enables efficiency. To dismiss or demean them is to ignore the interdependence that underpins every daily transaction. Awareness of this interconnectedness cultivates humility, the ability to recognize the contributions of others, regardless of their perceived social rank, is a hallmark of wisdom and self-mastery. The first principle in changing behavior is self-reflection. Examine assumptions about status and importance that influence interaction. Are judgments being made based on uniform title or role rather than character or effort? Conscious recognition of these biases is necessary before they manifest in words or actions. Without this awareness, disrespect becomes automatic, habitual, and invisible to oneself, yet highly visible to others. Self-observation is a tool of restraint, allowing deliberate, ethical action to replace reflexive superiority. Practical communication is crucial. Tone, phrasing, and patience define the quality of interaction. Even when frustration arises, a delayed order, a mistake, or a miscommunication, responding calmly and politely preserves dignity for all parties. Simple adjustments, such as using please and thank you, asking clarifying questions instead of making accusations, and acknowledging effort, transform the interaction from a transaction into a moment of mutual respect. Words, chosen deliberately, demonstrate competence and emotional intelligence far more effectively than volume or condescension. Empathy amplifies ethical awareness. Imagine the mental and physical demands of the role from the perspective of a service worker. Repetitive tasks, exposure to complaints, and the emotional labor of managing strangers' expectations require resilience and composure. Recognizing this human effort fosters patience and mitigates the impulse to belittle or dominate. Empathy is not weakness. It is a strategic strength, enhancing relational intelligence and social perception. Individuals who consistently practice empathy develop influence through respect rather than coercion. Behavioral rehearsal strengthens social competence. Mentally rehearse challenging scenarios, slow service, incorrect orders or crowded spaces, and practice responses that maintain composure and respect. Visualization of constructive dialogue builds neural pathways that support ethical behavior in real time. Over repeated practice, respectful communication becomes instinctive, reducing the likelihood of reactive behavior that diminishes both self-image and the well-being of others. Boundaries and fairness are central. A person can maintain expectations for service quality without demeaning the provider. Clear, calm, and assertive communication ensures needs are met while preserving the dignity of all involved. Dominance through insult or intimidation achieves compliance at the cost of respect and trust. Long-term influence is derived from ethical authority, not intimidation. Discipline in communication strengthens credibility, reinforcing the principle that respect is not conditional on role or status. Reflection after interactions enhances moral growth. Consider moments when impatience or condescension surfaced. Examine triggers, emotional state, and the impact on both parties. Reflection is a feedback loop that converts experience into understanding and strategy. Each thoughtful evaluation strengthens self-awareness, emotional regulation, and ethical consistency. Character is shaped incrementally through conscious adjustment in everyday encounters. Internal narrative plays a crucial role in behavioral transformation. Stories told to oneself about superiority, entitlement, or dominance shape responses. Replace narratives of status-based privilege with those emphasizing interconnectedness, mutual respect, and shared humanity. This reframing guides behavior unconsciously, fostering actions that align with principle rather than impulse. Over time, internal narratives become the foundation of habitual ethical conduct. Social consequences of disrespect are profound. Repeatedly treating service workers as inferior signals arrogance, insecurity, and lack of emotional maturity. Witnesses internalize these cues, potentially withdrawing trust or cooperation. Relationships strain, reputations suffer, and opportunities diminish. Conversely, consistent respect fosters loyalty, cooperation, and social credibility. The practice of acknowledging others' value builds trust networks and enhances influence far more effectively than displays of superiority. Patience is a practical skill with direct benefits. Service roles often involve delays, errors, or procedural constraints. Exercising patience reduces the emotional charge of these moments and allows for strategic problem-solving. Deep breathing, grounding techniques, or a brief pause before speaking prevents reactive condescension. The body and mind respond to these cues with calmness, reinforcing deliberate rather than impulsive action. Mastery over reaction transforms minor frustrations into exercises in composure and resilience. Ethical consistency enhances personal growth. Treating every individual, regardless of perceived status, with respect aligns behavior with long-term values rather than short-term convenience. This consistency strengthens self-trust and confidence, reducing cognitive dissonance and the internal conflict that arises from ethical compromise. Individuals who integrate this discipline develop reputations for reliability, fairness, and emotional maturity, traits that yield benefits across personal and professional contexts. Mindfulness in daily interactions reinforces ethical conduct. Every transaction with service personnel is an opportunity to practice attention, restraint, and awareness. Observing posture, tone, and language ensures that communication reflects intention rather than habit. Mindfulness bridges the gap between ethical knowledge and applied behavior, cultivating subtle but profound shifts in conduct. The disciplined individual learns to navigate minor interactions with precision, transforming routine encounters into opportunities for character development. Long-term benefits of treating service workers with respect are both practical and psychological. Relationships flourish, networks expand, and social influence grows. Internal satisfaction increases as actions consistently align with moral values. Stress diminishes when interactions are guided by principle rather than impulse. Ethical behavior fosters resilience, empathy, and awareness, creating a ripple effect that enhances both personal life and societal cohesion. Small, disciplined choices in everyday transactions accumulate into a robust moral framework. The choice to treat service workers as equals is not just about social etiquette. It is a reflection of character and inner mastery. Respect fosters dignity for both parties, models ethical conduct for observers, and reinforces a life oriented toward fairness and empathy. Every deliberate act of courtesy strengthens internal alignment, enhances trustworthiness, and cultivates enduring influence. In contrast, condescension erodes character, damages relationships, and undermines long-term authority. Discipline, awareness, and empathy transform ordinary service interactions into exercises in integrity, emotional intelligence, and self-mastery, producing benefits that extend far beyond the moment. Number 10. Seek validation through public drama. There is a subtle but powerful temptation in public life to amplify personal grievances, frustrations, or achievements through drama. Posting provocative statements online, creating spectacles in public spaces, or turning minor conflicts into performative spectacles can give the illusion of attention, relevance, or influence. Public drama feels rewarding in the moment. It draws eyes, invites commentary, and provokes emotional reactions. Yet beneath the surface, it is a hollow source of validation. Seeking recognition through conflict or spectacle is a surrender of self-respect to external approval, a reliance on the fleeting judgment of strangers rather than a foundation built on personal integrity, discipline, and awareness. At the core of this behavior is a deep human desire to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. The craving for recognition is natural, but its fulfillment through public spectacle is unstable and dependent on circumstances outside one's control. A comment overlooked, a post ignored, or a confrontation unnoticed creates instant dissatisfaction. The validation drawn from drama is brittle. It exists in external responses rather than internal conviction. Over time, this dependence shapes identity, eroding the ability to find meaning and self-worth in personal growth, accomplishments, or quiet integrity. Self-awareness is the first line of defense against this impulse. Recognize the triggers that provoke the urge to perform or dramatize, feelings of inadequacy, envy, frustration, or desire for attention. Examine the underlying need driving the behavior. Does this action serve personal development, strengthen relationships, or contribute to a larger purpose? Or does it exist primarily to provoke reaction, elicit sympathy, or assert dominance? Conscious recognition of motives illuminates the difference between authentic expression and performative drama, allowing one to act with intention rather than impulse. The physiological and psychological patterns that fuel public drama are instructive. Emotional spikes, anger, excitement, or embarrassment drive the desire to externalize personal conflicts. Heart rate accelerates, adrenaline surges, and the mind narrows on the perceived audience. Recognizing these responses allows for intervention. Pausing, breathing deeply, and reframing the situation redirects energy from spectacle toward deliberate action. Emotional regulation transforms reactive expression into strategic communication, cultivating mastery over impulses that would otherwise lead to public spectacle. Empathy is another essential tool. Consider the effect of public drama on those who witness it. Strangers, friends, colleagues, or family members. Emotional outbursts, performative conflict, or exaggerated claims provoke discomfort, confusion, or alienation. By imagining the experience of the audience, it becomes possible to weigh the impact of one's behavior against the desire for attention. Ethical awareness arises from the recognition that personal validation should not come at the expense of others' peace or dignity. Practical strategies exist for channeling the need for recognition into constructive avenues. Journaling, private reflection, or intimate conversation with trusted individuals provides outlets for expression without the collateral harm of public spectacle. Creative endeavors, writing, art, music, or problem-solving offer meaningful ways to externalize emotion, achievements, and frustrations while fostering growth and skill. Each of these avenues satisfies the human desire to be acknowledged, but in ways that build competence, character, and enduring respect rather than superficial attention. Boundary setting strengthens resilience against external pressures. Define personal rules for what will be shared publicly and what will remain private. Determine criteria for engagement. Is the interaction productive, necessary, or ethically sound? Pre-established limits. Reduce impulsive, attention-seeking behavior and create consistency in public conduct. Boundaries are tools of discipline, protecting both self-respect and the well-being of others from the chaos of performative validation. Reflection and mental rehearsal are powerful allies. Visualize scenarios that might provoke public drama, disagreements online, minor slights in public, or achievements online, minor slights in public, or achievements unnoticed by peers. Mentally rehearse responses grounded in composure, integrity, and long-term perspective. Consider phrases, gestures, or silences that communicate strength without spectacle. Regular rehearsal conditions responses, making ethical and deliberate action the default rather than an afterthought. The disciplined mind anticipates challenges and navigates them with intention. Cognitive reframing transforms perception of attention and recognition. Instead of equating visibility with value, internalize that self-worth arises from consistent action, mastery of skills, ethical behavior, and contribution to others' well-being. Recognition becomes a byproduct of excellence and integrity rather than the goal of attention-seeking. Reframing attention as a consequence rather than a driver shifts energy away from performative behavior toward meaningful, lasting achievement. Social modeling reinforces restraint. Observe individuals who navigate public spaces and digital platforms without succumbing to spectacle. Note tone, pacing, and focus on substance rather than dramatics. Model these behaviors in one's own life, consciously practicing humility, strategic communication, and thoughtful expression. Imitation of disciplined exemplars builds social intelligence and internalizes patterns of ethical conduct that resist the temptation of immediate gratification through attention. Internal narrative is crucial. The stories we tell ourselves about relevance, importance, and influence shape behavior. Replace narratives that justify public dramatization with those emphasizing self-mastery, patience, and thoughtful impact. For example, instead of thinking, "I must be heard now," frame it as, "I will act deliberately, letting my values guide attention and influence." Internal narratives reinforce long-term discipline, shaping instinctive responses and reducing reliance on transient emotion. Long-term consequences of seeking validation through public drama are profound. Relationships become strained as trust diminishes and authenticity is questioned. Reputation erodes when behavior is perceived as self-serving or manipulative. Opportunities may be lost to individuals who project steadiness, reliability, and integrity. In contrast, disciplined self-expression cultivates respect, strengthens networks, and enhances influence. Attention earned through competence and ethical action is durable. Attention gained through spectacle is fleeting. Practical emotional tools reduce the need for public dramatization. Mindfulness, meditation, or controlled breathing stabilize emotional responses. Pausing before sharing content, posting online, or responding in public prevents reactive behavior. Physical grounding, focusing on posture, sensation, or environment, anchors the mind, creating space for deliberate decision-making. These practices create a buffer between impulse and action, transforming instinctive dramatization into conscious expression. Accountability reinforces progress. Regularly review moments of potential drama where impulse is managed. Did behavior align with long-term values? Adjust strategies accordingly. Accountability is both internal and external. Self-honesty cultivates integrity, while consistent observation of social outcomes provides feedback. Over time, the habitual practice of accountability strengthens moral and emotional resilience, reducing vulnerability to attention-seeking through spectacle. The benefits of restraint are subtle, but transformative. Self-worth becomes internally derived, social influence is enhanced, and interpersonal trust deepens. By redirecting energy from performative acts to deliberate, skillful action, one cultivates competence, wisdom, and emotional intelligence. Public presence becomes a reflection of discipline, not impulsive desire for approval. Influence grows organically from substance rather than spectacle. Ultimately, seeking validation through public drama is a surrender of autonomy to external judgment. The disciplined alternative is to cultivate recognition internally, practice empathy, exercise restraint, and channel energy into constructive action. Public attention becomes a secondary effect of character, skill, and ethical behavior rather than the object of desire. Over time, consistent practice of these principles builds credibility, inner strength, and lasting respect. The individual who chooses integrity over spectacle transforms ordinary interactions into opportunities for mastery, influence, and personal growth, creating a life defined by deliberate action rather than fleeting applause.